KPFA Radio presents Flashpoints, an award-winning frontline investigative news magazine focusing on human, civil, and workers' rights, issues of war and peace, global warming, racism and poverty, and other issues. Hosted by Bernstein. Please enjoy this episode of Flashpoints that previously aired live on KPFA Radio.
Radio in San Francisco. This is Flashpoints. I'm Bernstein. Today on the show, protesting Germany's support for the Israeli genocide and celebrating the life and work of our own Miguel Gavilan Molina. 4 decades and more for free speech radio. All this and more coming up straight ahead on Flashpoints. Stay tuned. And you're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. My name is Bernstein. This is your daily investigative news magazine. We're coming to you every weekday from 5 to 6 over the Pacifica Radio Network. We are glad to have you with us today on Free Speech, No Holds Barred, Truth to Power Radio. And later on in the broadcast, we're going to be talking to some Code Pinkers again. They've been a part of a national, really international action against Germany and German support for the genocide. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that later on. The action continues. But we're going to start off the day a little bit different today. Today we're going to honor a close friend of this program, a real important part of the work we do, the sort of, you can call him the creator of many things, including Flashpoints. We are honoring KPFA's legendary producer, Miguel Gavilan Molina, for 40 years, I think it may be 43, oh my God, years of exalted service to KPFA as the host maestro for La Onda Bajita, and for 21 years as senior producer on Flashpoints. La Onda is the only KPFA show to be honored formally by the state of California for its contributions in the areas of cultural awareness and social change. With Miguel Gavilan Molina, Flashpoints was welcomed and given access to the leaders in the indigenous communities and communities of color from Standing Rock to the U.S.-Mexico border at Nogales. With Miguel, we broadcast live from day labor centers down the block from where the notorious Sheriff Joseph Arpaio was jailing and abusing refugees. Miguel produced our extraordinary coverage of the Republican Convention, co-hosted with American Indian Movement co-founder Bill Means from an Indian school down the block from the site of a custom massacre. In other words, that's where the Republicans decided to try and elect the next president. Bill also hosted with Gavilan Flashpoints and KPFA broadcasts from Alcatraz on Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't know how many years we did that, and Gavilan did that before me. And of course, after over 40 years, La Onda Bajita remains a unique, original, inspiring live broadcast and a signature sound of KPFA. So add this to it. Miguel, last April 3rd to 26th, walked through the fields of fire as a part of a protest by the United Farm Workers for equal rights and equal rights to organize. Miguel played a key role in getting the word out. He reported and recorded as he walked through 100-degree plus weather, and it took a lot out of him, but it gave a lot to the world. The farm workers were successful in that march, and Miguel was celebrated by the United Farm Workers, and that wouldn't be the first time. We are happy to have you as our senior producer for, you said 20, 21 years, Miguel? Welcome back to Flashpoints.
21 years, Dennis, and thank you for bringing me on board to the team and giving me a platform to bring forth voices from the indigenous communities on this hemisphere, the Americas, and also focusing here within the U.S. territories, the plight and struggle of farm workers to the struggle on reservations. And we've Flashpoints and you, Dennis, have supported those efforts. You've had my back, and I've been privileged and honored to work with you, the team, and of course, Free Speech Radio, which is, basically at the heart of what we do, pushing that levels, that microphone, that torch to bring, voice to the voiceless. And I'm a little choked up right now. But again, Dennis, yourself creating Flashpoints, that national platform, and you've given me the green light so many times throughout the years. And I've described it to people sometimes. It's like, we start walking, we start crawling till we get to the mountaintop, and then at the mountaintop, is a volcano, and you got the hold of the rope. I take the rope and jump into the volcano. I find the landing, I pull the rope, and the whole crew comes down, and we go to it, facing whatever. And like I said,
Yeah. Go on,
it's been quite a trip, quite a cruise. And the beautiful thing is we're still cruising, Dennis, and we brought in all these, young folks, to be part of, combining Flashpoints and La Onda to Flash Onda. And we've got these generation groups, that once you and I, get to a place to where we can't, do it constantly the way we do, the crews and people we've trained, we've brought in this mix, will continue the work of Flashpoints. We'll continue the work and the fight to keep free speech radio alive and on the air.
Wow. Well, what we're doing here, just to remind people if you're just tuning in, my special guest for the first half of this show is our own Miguel Gavilan Molina. He's a senior producer on Flashpoints. He is the visionary behind La Onda Bajita, which is for so many years extraordinary live radio that comes out of the communities that we don't hear much about on the corporate white media, but are crucial to keeping our worlds going. And Miguel, I want to start here. I want to go to the last August 3rd, the march, the 335-mile pilgrimage for workers' rights that you were a part of, that you reported on for us, and that you were celebrated by the UFW because of your extraordinary presence there. And I've been reading through your journal and editing it, and there are so many amazing parts to the journal you kept as a part of that successful protest and pilgrimage. And in it are you had visions as you walked through 100-degree weather about what it was like for you being a child farm worker. And it sort of was extraordinary. And that must have been something for you as you marched for the UFWs and to tell the world what was going on.
It was probably the most challenging ordeal that I've ever faced in my life. And at the end of the pilgrimage, Dennis, the United Farm Workers took the core group of us, and they recognized each one of us at a celebration that the farm workers had a year and a half ago, December. But during that, I called it the ordeal because, 3 digits. We're in the hottest part of the year here in California, which is August. And, here on the coast, it might be 100 or 110. In the valley, it's 120, 125. And when you're walking next to the road asphalt. Asphalt heats up and even increases the heat of the air. So if you're walking in 120-degree weather in the afternoon next to the asphalt, next to the roadway, it's 125, 130, exhausting, toxic. And there was times that I got delirious. I was like having these daydreams and staggering, and not just myself, everybody. We all sacrificed our bodies, and I did have two, 3 or 4 times I had flashes. As I'm looking down the fields and I see in the distance, a just a broken down trailer and a shack with and there's children playing and running around, and I just flashed back to my childhood, just like I was witnessing as I was walking. I'd see workers on ladders, picking nectarines, peaches, picking apples, picking oranges, mandarins, all those different types of citrus fruits, lemons, limes, and I'd see them in ladders, and it almost from a distance, the heat, delirious, the heat coming off the ground causing illusions. It's almost I would be watching down at these rows of orchards of trees of fruits, and it's almost as if I was looking at, farm workers, hanging, and drifting in the wind on these branches. It's in some ways, as if the work itself was killing them. And in reality, the valley is one of the most toxic pesticides, where they use so much of that, chemicals, not just, to spray plants, but also to fertilizer, just all that fungicide, that they spray and everything. And so eventually these workers, working in those kinds of conditions, they all eventually, by the time they're 50, Dennis, they start getting crippling diseases. They can no longer, they lose their ability to walk because their backs are shattered from, working so hard, bent all day, picking fruit, from celery to carrots to onions to garlic, bending, 10, 12 hours a day, picking, over a, 20, 30 year, life will eventually break your body. And so for me, it was just looking at my childhood, Dennis, all over again. And I'd say to myself, wow, we've created this incredible agricultural empire. And yet here we are, 60 years earlier, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta launched the first pilgrimage, I believe 66, 7 years ago, for the rights for farm workers to unionize, for the rights to have, the ability to vote for a union of their choice. And so when I did this walk a year and a half ago, Dennis, it was basically for the same thing, walking again, pilgrimage to Sacramento from Delano to have the right to vote, just like everyone can vote, in the privacy of their homes or secret ballots and so forth without intimidation or harassment. So a lot of it was like, wow, here I first came to a rally with my godfather and my couple of my uncles and some of my father's compadres when I was 12 years old, on 1966 for that same reason. So I said, here I am, 70 years old. Well, I wasn't 70 years old. I was 68 when I took the walk, doing it all over again. I said, what happened here? What happened here? We're doing the same thing we did like 60 years ago. So it was kind of difficult, but eventually we all did made it. Eventually, the governor, after negotiations and a 30-day standoff, eventually, did sign, and it was a victory for the United Farm Workers. But that he only signed, Dennis, Gavin Newsom only signed that because Kamala Harris, called him out, vice president, and the president, Joe Biden called him out. Hey, Gavin, we support the United Farm Workers. What are you doing in California? So it was all political. But for me, Dennis, I just learned one thing that, people need to connect the dots. We live in an agricultural empire that feeds the state, that feeds the country and the world. And yet those that toil in the soil, cultivate, plant, harvest, and even sometimes ship the stuff, pack it in packing houses, you know, don't get the recognition. Their salaries are still the lowest wages, of workers in this country. And yet they're dependent on feeding the nation. There's a large percentage of farm workers that are undocumented. They have no protections. There are no health benefits. There are no Social Security. I walked with people that have been here 20, 30, years, never committed a crime, never broke the law, paid taxes, were good community members, but undocumented, and they have no rights. So it's a struggle for me, and I will continue walking. I will continue doing whatever it is to the point to where this country, the state, recognizes the contributions of farm workers, of Mexicans, of indigenous peoples. And the irony is, for myself as a Chicano Indian man, is that these are our ancestral lands. These California, all the Southwest, is our ancient ancestral lands that, they were invaded and occupied, over 150, 60 years ago by U.S. cavalry and its forces. And today, it's very difficult being in these territories and almost rendered strangers in our own homelands. We're labeled as foreigners, and now we have a supremacist candidate running, for the former president running for the presidency, and reducing us again to animals and vermin, accusing the masses of brown people who migrate here, who come here to work, to contribute, as poisoning the blood of this country, of this nation. That is so outrageously untrue. But it's difficult because, we struggle, we contribute, we try to bring awareness. I started, one of these shows, Dennis, La Onda, because I got tired of going out and cruising on a Sunday afternoon and getting pulled over by the police, getting hassled, harassed, checkpoints, for no other reason than, a bunch of brown, folks cruising in the car, low riding, and, in some areas violating ordinances, in some areas, just harassment in general. So I just got tired, and I said, something needs to be done. We have to have some freedom. So I started a show called The Low Show Profile at the Bilingual Broadcasting Foundation up in Santa Rosa, KBBF. And we started doing a program and telling people their rights, what you can cruise, where you can go, to be careful. Everybody has certain rights to gather. We have certain rights to, cultural expression, all these things. And we started, raising a consciousness. And we recently saw this last year where finally the ban on low riding, which had been there for 30, 40 years, and was finally lifted, and I believe James Ramos, an assemblyman from Southern California, San Bernardino, Riverside County, that area, put a piece of, resolution in, and eventually they've got the ban on cruising and low riding lifted just last year. So the show and then coming on Flashpoints created an opportunity to bring all these issues, to mainstream, to the general mainstream public, to say, hey, we're very much part. You depend on us for food. You depend on us to keep working the fields, to provide the bounty, to provide the agricultural wealth that so many people have benefited from, so many people have gained from. And yet we who slave and toil in the soil, are left at the bottom of the ladder. So, we will continue bringing that light. And this weekend, Dennis, we got the Cesar Chavez parade and march that we've been invited to come and cover on Saturday. Again, honoring the work of Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and all the United Farm Workers and all campesinos, whether they're union members or not, are part of this life and experience.
Let me jump in here. Let people know that you're listening to a special edition of Flashpoints. We're speaking with our own senior producer, Miguel Gavilan Molina. You've heard about all the celebrations, 75 years of KPFA and Pacifica, and we're very proud of that. And we've got somebody here who's been, is it 43 years? You started 43 years ago?
44.
44. All right, let's not. And 21 years on Flashpoints. And some of the extraordinary, some of the extraordinary things, like the doors that you opened for us, Miguel, in terms of working with the American Indian movement and Bill Means. Who could ever forget our chance as we broadcast the Republican convention? You remember McCain and Palin, the original Trump. And they decided to have their Republican presidential campaign in Minneapolis, St. Paul, home of Bill Means' American Indian movement. So Bill helped us arrange our broadcast from an Indian school right around the corner from where the convention was being held, and also right around the corner from the site of one of Custer's massacres. And so there we were, the Flashpoint Show, broadcasting nationally with the founder of the American Indian movement in an Indian school, just a couple of feet, if you will, proverbial feet, away from a gravesite that was part of the genocide against the indigenous movement. And I can tell you, you remember, Miguel, it was extraordinary to have Bill to be able to cover the convention and to give it an indigenous context.
No, absolutely. And, that crew, we were on the move. It was myself, yourself, Dennis. We had Falcon. We had Ton Gonzalez from AIM West. And, there was times to where, the police would circle around us on their bicycles, ready to club anybody that was out of line. And for that duration of time we were there, they were doing preemptive, like raids on so-called alleged, organizers that they considered, possible terrorists. I don't know if you remember that, but some of the, young people that were out there, getting ready to protest were raided and rounded up and, detained. It was just like, wow, what happened to people's civil liberties? What we saw, what we witnessed, civil liberties went out the window that in that time of the, George W.'s, effort to become president.
Right. And of course, we were welcome again with your incredible connection to the indigenous movement. We were welcome again at Standing Rock, where we were able to sit with some of the key organizers and get an inside view of what that resistance, that ongoing resistance to genocide was all about. And we went from there. And I think one of the most powerful broadcasts that we did were when we were broadcasting from a day labor center in Phoenix, around the corner from, you remember Sheriff Joseph Arpaio, who was had been torturing refugees and people fleeing their own violence in their own homelands, and he was torturing them again there. He became a friend of Donald Trump. But we were there down the block, and where were we broadcasting from? From a day labor center with perfect connection to the story. It's amazing, right, Miguel?
It was quite a scene there, Dennis, as you recall. George Arpaio was eventually, taken in charge with inhumane treatment of people, and he was convicted and sent to jail. Convicted and sent to jail. And as soon as the ex-president Trump got into power, he pardoned him. I think that was one of his first actions, where he pardoned him and called him, the toughest, marshal in the West. Unbelievable. But there we were. And, George Arpaio did make an attempt to come back, but the community was so well organized in eventually having him convicted that when he tried to regain his position, he got completely blown off, that race by people's efforts and the incredible organizing of, the diverse community, and there is a diverse community in Arizona that came together to stop that, to stop him from becoming sheriff again.
Again, you're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. We're celebrating our senior producer, Miguel Gavilan Molina, in the context of 75 years of free speech radio, KPFA Pacifica. Beautiful event over the weekend, and very successful. We were happy to see there, and it was interesting, Miguel. At one point, Amy was talking about reminding people how dangerous it can be to be a journalist, to be an alternative journalist, to be working for Pacifica Radio. You and I both have been beaten up and threatened right inside our own offices at KPFA.
Oh yeah, Dennis. When I first got to KPFA, I was invited by Buster Gonzalez, and I arrived to do a fall marathon in 1979, and it was so successful, and there was such a request to have the show La Onda on that I was invited to start a regular weekly program on KPFA. So I went from KBBF 89.1 FM in Santa Rosa to KPFA there at 94.1 in Berkeley there, and I was there for the first the first few years, and there was a breakdown of communication with a particular person, and my senior producer at that time was Santiago Casal, and Buster Gonzalez, who was our board-op engineer and producer of the show. There was a breakdown of communication with a certain individual. That individual came on a later date and came to assault my producer and the crew and so forth. And I was there and I saw it, and it was getting ugly and threatened of violence, and I had to jump into it because a couple of our crew members, young women, were there with my producer Santiago Cosal, and this guy came in with a knife, and I jumped into the fray. I got them away from, I got those individuals away from the women and my producer, and in just a fracas that happened, I was able to, push all three of them away, and I took a stab to my chest. And I don't remember much after that other than I passed out and the ambulance came. I awakened in the ambulance. I was taken to the hospital, and the manager, David Salznicker, at that point was there. And it was quite an experience, but I learned something that day. And that's it. I will stand and defend, whoever can't defend themselves. I will stand and help. If there is something that is about to be life-threatening, I will stand and deal with it to protect others and to protect the station, to protect the integrity of the work that we do. So that was my experience. It was like a baptismal of rage and violence, which I pushed out. And in the end, I grabbed that microphone, which I call the torch of light. And that light, will flare and radiate into the darkness and bring truth to power.
Miguel, I met you. I think we began working together in FIRE because I first met you when you were one of the first people, along with Barbara Lubin and Van Jones, to show up when I had to sit down to stand up for free speech radio. You'll remember that. There was a renegade board, and they decided a good idea would be to sell KPFA and BAI and do something else with the money. And we broke the story that they were pricing our stations, what they were worth. They actually had Clear Channel was up in the air measuring our channel, our signal, to see if it was as powerful. And we have a powerful signal, one of the most powerful signals in Northern California, Northern Central California.
Yes, we do.
And, at a certain point, the management had hired 6 armed guards I had intercepted a memo, you remember, that they were pricing these stations, and then all of a sudden the managers locked down the station, and when I broke the story of the memo, as soon as I finished my show at 6 o'clock, I was pursued by these armed guards. They followed me into a live studio, and the rest is history. All of a sudden, Mark Miracle is broadcasting live. So people have tried to shut us down, and you were there. I remember you showing up and saying, yeah, because you were my hero already. I loved the work you were doing on La Onda Bajita, and it was an amazing moment where we essentially decided to come together and share the power that we had together and the different focuses and to make something new. This is Dennis Bernstein, and we'll be right back after this message from KPFA.
KPFA Radio is a community-powered, listener-supported radio station based in Berkeley, California. We are able to bring you this content through donations and support from our listeners. Please consider supporting KPFA through a donation by visiting www.kpfa.org/donate. And now let's get back to the program.
And you're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. My name is Dennis Bernstein.
And we're still on it, Dennis. We're creating a whole new generation of street, barrio, field reporters who are devoted to the sacredness of the word, and that is free speech radio.
Absolutely. And, talk a little bit about what's coming up next week. There's going to be a celebration.
Yes, Dennis. On Saturday, it's the annual Cesar Chavez parade, rally, and fiesta. It's decades old. It's one of the biggest events in the Mission District. Organized by Roberto Hernandez, a.k.a. As the mayor of the Mission. And it's family-friendly, and we celebrate, again, the life and times of Cesar Chavez. In the mix, we celebrate Dolores, who continues the advocacy of the plight of farm workers. And we celebrate that in these difficult times, in this, national elections coming up, that we as a people, contribute to the health and wellness of this country, through our labor, through our sweat, and sometimes, blood and sweat. We bring it to another level to provide, to keep this state, healthy, strong, to keep the country fed. But we must never forget, as I witnessed just not too long ago, back in February when I went with a group of Somos and Chirla and Caravan from the U.S.-Mexican border, San Isidro, Tijuana, all the way to Sacramento for the registry bill that would allow, agricultural and migrant workers the right to be able to get on the path to citizenship. So we do these things in this, and we will continue to do that, to advocate, to push for, recognition and our contributions that we as a people make to the economy of the United States. And again, this Saturday, the big day will be in San Francisco. I would say get there early, take any kind of mass transit, take the train, BART, to get in, because parking is going to be very difficult. But come and celebrate and be part of the experience, and in one of the oldest barrios in the state, which is the Mission, and be part of life, music, dance, song, and poetry, and just a sunshine day as under the sun, as we say, as ourselves. Danny Valdez, Luis Valdez's brother, the creator of Zoot Suit, the film, says, we are children of the sun, and we will be celebrating this Saturday.
And one more thing, Gavilan, we can't end this conversation without recognizing the connection that KPFA has with Alcatraz and the bridge that you created with other members of this community that allows KPFA to be an integral part of major celebrations every year in terms of the indigenous community. Would you just remind people a little bit about the importance of those celebrations? I mean, it started off with a few people. Now, when you go out there and you prepare the presentation and the broadcast, it's thousands.
It is, Dennis, and we've been going out there, I believe, 33 years, but I really want to thank and acknowledge the work of Don Gonzalez from AIM West, who brought that tradition back to the island, back in, I believe, 1990, maybe 91, and he brought, because the occupation ended, back in 1970. After occupying Alcatraz for 18 months from 69 to 70. And so those sunrise ceremonies, had stopped. But because we were getting close to 500 years of what they call the colonial governments here in the United States and England, France, and Spain, called the 500 years of the discovery, we called it 500 years of indigenous resistance to the so-called discovery. Nobody discovered us. Columbus was lost. But besides that, the tradition was brought back to the island to have a sunrise ceremony and acknowledge the existence of indigenous nations, within California, within the country. And it really, since then, has grown and grown. And in the beginning, that was efforts by the International Indian Treaty Council and the American Indian Movement. And again, I say that if it hadn't been the work of Don Gonzalez and the staff at that time at Treaty Council, the event would have never happened. But it did. And we were fortunate to have the support at that time to bring it back of Jim Bennett, and then also Andrew Phillips and Ray Campanella, who all, and Gus Newport, they all, throughout those successions, different managers at KPFA, supported the idea. And I think eventually it was Ray Campanella who recognized it as a tradition. This is a KPFA tradition to do coverage of this incredible gathering of Indian nations on the rock. Because one of the things that it really focused on, Dennis, is it made it clear, before the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969, Indians were referred to, we didn't exist. We'd pop up in television or Western movies as the savages, raging killers. That's all. We were restricted to Hollywood negative stereotypes. But with that particular jump that Richard Oakes made with the support of students from University of San Francisco and Berkeley, that leap that he made into that water brought indigenous peoples from basically, been disappeared to all of a sudden in the forefront of this country's consciousness, that we have not disappeared, we have not vanished, we weren't completely exterminated and wiped out. We're still here, and we're growing and stronger than ever. So it became a tradition that was embraced by the different managers of KPFA throughout the decades. And today, as you said, Dennis, you go out there, particularly on what we call on Thanksgiving sunrise ceremony in November, there's been 5,000 to 7,000 people that come out there. It's just unbelievable. And it's the native church. There's no walls, there's no structure. It's open, indigenous native church. And we gather there to give thanks to our survival, to mourn for the losses and the genocide. But as survivors of genocide in this country, we have a lot to celebrate, and the continuous and the growing influence of indigenous thought, philosophies, and culture. It's just really powerful, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And we keep celebrating that, and we'll bring that microphone to the voices on Alcatraz.
All right. Well, we are appreciative of your presence, Gavilan. of the incredible work you've done with us on Flashpoints, the creation of Flash Onda, working together with La Onda Bajita, all the incredible work that you've done. And La Onda Bajita is also sort of it's a workshop in progress at all times, and it's always bringing in new people. And opening the door for so many people. You open the door, that's the concept, and you touch talent, and genius arises.
Yes. We've been real fortunate. The chronological history of La Onda, I mean, it was something, Dennis, when the State Assembly, the legislature of California recognized La Onda and the different contributions, but I could have never. It just wasn't me. In the beginning, the first crew of La Onda, I remember Ramiro Moran, I remember Miguel Gavilan, even, ¿cómo se llama? Fireball, who was he was eventually, back in the 90s, Speaker of the House here in California, Marco Fireball. And we were so fortunate because he was a crew member of La Onda when he was getting his law degree from UC Berkeley. And eventually he rose up to become the Speaker of the Assembly of California, Marco Fireball. And we were, like I said, he was with us for 2 years, answering phones and doing dedications. So that's just an example.
I think it's
another
before
one,
my time.
We were the first. No. Another one, of course, which has become legendary, is Culture Clash. I interviewed them after their first public performance, which was to a small little group at the Mission Cultural Center, Mission Galleria. And the following week I had him on the radio, and a couple of weeks later, somebody hears him at a national public radio conference in San Francisco. And before I know it, a month later, they're in New York and getting ready to launch Culture Clash on, New York Theater, Broadway. So it just been an incredible journey. But the most important and significant for me, Dennis, was coming on board on the Flashpoints crew. And you've opened up a platform to give voice to all these communities that mainstream and sometimes even what I call national public radio, overseas, or, they don't focus on these particular communities. But Flashpoints has given a platform to bring these communities into the mainstream, a progressive, moderate, liberal, alternative, what we call, America, and bringing voices of the voiceless and giving face to those voices. And I just have you and Mike and, Flashpoints to be thankful for and in gratitude. Thank you, Dennis. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. We are going to do this as long as we can. That's Miguel Gavilan Molina. We celebrate his work in the context 75 years of free speech radio, KPFA. We are proud to be a part of it, and we will do the work that we can to break the hold on censorship. Gavilan, we will talk to you soon. Be safe.
I'll see you Saturday. Ahuya. Si se puede.
Si se puede. Well, Code Pink has been busy again. It started in the German consulate in D.C., and it's sort of a cross-country national action against the genocide that we have all been talking about, reporting about, doing everything we can to stop the slaughter and the killing. Code Pink has been front and center, and they were active today. Joining us to talk about this action, sponsored by Code Pink at these German embassies and consulates, is Marcy Winograd. She's a national organizer and activist with Code Pink, and San Francisco's Code Pink, Cynthia Papermaster, also joins us as well. Welcome to both of you. Marcy Winograd, good to have you with us. Could you describe the action, how it started in D.C., and sort of a bit of the concept, how it has been unfolding?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us on your show. It's a great honor to be with you and your audience. So today, the significance of today is that it's the first of 2 days of hearings in The Hague at the International Court of Justice on a case brought by Nicaragua against Germany for aiding and abetting genocide with its weapons shipments to Israel. According to a research institute in Stockholm, the United States provides 69% of the weaponry for Israel, Germany another 30%. Some may say, well, why isn't Germany suing the United States in the World Court or the ICJ? The reason is because the United States, even though it signed the treaty for the UN Genocide Convention, has objected to the jurisdiction of the convention, saying, this really doesn't apply to us in such and such cases. And so Nicaragua, I assume, rather than having a case thrown out on a technicality, has gone after Germany. So what we did at Code Pink was organize a presence at some of the major representative offices of the German government. So yes, we had a presence of about 50 to 60 people, I believe, in D.C. in front of the German embassy. They went in and spoke to members of the staff, and I can talk about that in a minute. We had also a picket line in front of the German consulate in Los Angeles. We had about 50 people there. We had about 10 people who met for an hour with the consul general in Chicago for Germany and presented all sorts of evidence on the genocide and urged again, please fulfill your obligations under the UN Convention on Genocide. You need to not only stop providing these weapons, but do everything you can to prevent further unfolding of genocide. Those were the main actions, and of course San Francisco, which Cynthia can talk about. But the point is that we want to show that the United States, the people of the United States, support Nicaragua's efforts and the efforts of South Africa to hold Israel accountable and those who are aiding and abetting, such as Germany. And I'll just add that in their request to the International Court of Justice, Nicaragua has asked, even though the claim is against Nicaragua, they have asked the court to issue a provisional order ordering the United States and Germany to both stop sending weapons to Israel.
When you went in Washington to the German consulate, there was a dialogue. I'm interested to know what people on the other side of this were saying to you, what that dialogue might have sounded like.
Yes, Code Pink tweeted about it, and we have a video that basically tells the story. They said that when they went into the German embassy in Washington, D.C., they were told that, yes, we're very sad about what's happening, but there was no sense of urgency. They said, well, these killings need to be investigated, and it's going to take time. It just that's due process. It takes time. So clearly, it was a lot of obfuscation and not recognizing the truth of the matter, which is that this is genocide. So that's what happened in D.C. In Los Angeles, I had gone up before our picket line just to check out the situation. It was on the 5th floor of a big office building on Wilshire Boulevard in L.A., and I walked right in. The doors were open. Of course, a guy was behind the glass. I said, I have a letter I'd like to deliver. He said, well, unless you have an appointment, you need to leave. So I left. And then we had our picket line, and the guard said, okay, one of you can go up and deliver the letter. And this time we had a Palestinian American with us who gave a very inspiring speech. She went up with our letter signed by about 50 people at our picket line. And this time the doors to the consulate were closed. Clearly they were concerned, whereas before it was open, they had closed the door. She knocked. They looked at her suspiciously. They didn't realize exactly who she was at first, but she gave them the letter, and they quickly took it and slammed the door. Basically, that's what happened there. I'm still waiting to hear about New York City.
Well, let's hear about San Francisco. We've got Cynthia Papermaster, who has been, you might say, a little active on this front. And what was it like today here in San Francisco, Cynthia Papermaster?
Well, Dennis, thank you for inviting us.
Sure.
There were about 20 of us outside the German consulate on Jackson Street in San Francisco in Pacific Heights. It's a beautiful building. It was under construction. There was kind of some noise, a lot of noise there, but we circled up. We read the letter to the German consul. We took turns reading the letter, and it was beautifully written. Marcy, I don't know if you wrote the letter.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. It was. Thank you very much, because it was beautifully written, and we took turns reading it. And at the end of the letter, we kind of chanted the words at the end of the letter, and I'm about to get that up here on my computer. It says, "Stop the weapons to Israel, fund humanitarian relief to Gaza," and we chanted that over and over. I tried to go inside. I said I had asked for an appointment, but I hadn't heard back. The very, very nice and respectful security guard said, "Well, I'll take the letter and take it to the receptionist inside," which he did. And I verified that it went there. I called through the intercom. She said, "Thank you very much for this letter. I'll make sure the consul general gets it." And I said, "Please also make sure that the letter goes to the higher ups who make these policy decisions, because we're here to ask you to stop sending weapons to Israel and to fund humanitarian relief." So she heard me. I don't know what's going to happen now.
Marcy,
and I just want to add, Dennis, into this,
please,
if I can, that this was these actions were in response to a call from Palestinians in Germany who risk brutal beatings and arrest if they protest Israel, U.S. genocide in Gaza. So that's why we were out there in part to respond to their call and to mark, of course, the first day of the ICJ hearings on Nicaragua v. Germany.
Yeah.
And
I was very happy that we had some Palestinians with us today in San Francisco, and that is due to the wonderful work of the Arab Resource and Organizing Center, who has a calendar of actions. And I strongly suggest that people check their calendar frequently, not only for Code Pink actions, but so many groups are organizing around genocide going on, and encourage people to get involved. Thank you.
Yes, Marcy, and I'll just add that in L.A., if I can, we had some counter-protesters, if you want to call them that, just some very, very hostile people that were waving an Israeli flag, and we're really trying to pick a fight, a physical fight, and we're in people's faces and screaming and cursing at them. And someone called the police. I believe the security guard on the part of the consulate called the police. There were about 7 police officers out there the entire time telling us, "You can't be in the street. You can't have a megaphone. You don't have a permit, but you can say what you want." So that's what happened there. We did. I'm glad that we were able to avoid a physical altercation, because it was very tense for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
this is an Israeli flag as well. Sorry.
And this is a time you can expect that kind of response, along with perhaps the supporters that you're bringing along. But you're being effective. I can tell you that the hate outreach in my direction has definitely intensified in the last couple of weeks, which tells me that perhaps the movement is being effective, because we've done a lot of reporting on this show. Are you hopeful, Marcy, in any of the things we keep hearing on the corporate networks, that Biden's is angry and he's taken action now and things are going to be different, and the Israelis are withdrawing battalions? Are you hopeful? What are you looking for in terms of a sign?
I have to be hopeful. I can't afford not to be hopeful, given the tragedy that's unfolding in Gaza with 100,000 killed, named mass starvation and defunding of UNRWA. I'm hopeful in the sense that there are multiple levers of power, and this is mobilizing people across the country to pull on those various levers, and one of them being, be in front of the German consulate, but others that include voting uncommitted. And we now have 27 delegates who are going to be uncommitted at the Democratic Party convention in Chicago this summer. That's going to be a good thing. That's a potential opportunity for disruption, and we need to disrupt. We need to disrupt across the country to stop this genocide. I've seen this on Facebook. I'm sure you have as well. The question, if you ever wondered what you were doing during the Holocaust, it's what you're doing right now. So it can't be business as usual. We have to disrupt these military contractors, and we have to disrupt our House and Senate members. In California, we have Alex Padilla and LaFonza Butler, who she will no longer be in office in a short while, but both of them voting to fund this genocide, having no problem voting to defund UNRWA. That's the lifeline for food, water, and medicine to Gaza. So there needs to be tremendous pressure. But if you look at the historical record, you'll see, how did we end the Vietnam War? It dragged on. Unfortunately, it dragged on for years. Ultimately, it ended because, well, people in uniform refused to fight. They were fragging their officers, and we had hundreds of thousands of people mobilizing throughout the country, marching in the street, burning their draft cards, demanding an end, and pushing Congress to defund the war. And I think it is hopeful that 40 Democratic lawmakers recently came out with a letter saying that the arms have got to stop, that, this country has got to stop arming this genocide. So to me, that was an act that was taken not because these lawmakers, including Nancy Pelosi of San Francisco, are noble by any stretch, but because they can read the room. That they know there's an overwhelming majority in this country that support a ceasefire and in their district. And they're concerned about the election.
They can read the room. I'm going to give you, Cynthia, the last word. You've been focused on Nancy Pelosi. She sort of a little bit came around.
Writing your name, putting your name on a letter you didn't even draft, to me is just really kind of hardly anything. But it is a breakthrough. She'd like us to see it as a breakthrough, I guess. But what I'd like to say is on April 15th, nationwide economic blockade in many, many cities across the country, including in San Francisco, where we're going to have a parade over to the Internal Revenue Service at 450 Golden Gate on the 15th. And that'll be on the AROC calendar if people want to join us for that. We are trying to disrupt. We need to disrupt.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you and Code Pink. Amazing work. AROC, of course, people should check out AROC and all the amazing groups and young people and old people who are acting against this genocide. It is absolutely inspirational. And talking to all of you and hearing you stand up makes all the difference. So both of you, please stay safe and come back. Keep us posted. We're out of time.
Okay,
thank you.
We will.
Dennis,
thank you so
thanks,
much,
Marcy.
You've been listening to Flashpoints. You can find us on the World Wide Web wherever you get your podcasts or at kpfa.org.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you want to find more KPFA radio content, log on to www.kpfa.org. Also follow us on social media by visiting Facebook at KPFA 94.1 and Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at KPFA Radio. Plus, check out our KPFA TV video content on YouTube and twitch.tv at KPFA Radio. Subscribe to this podcast and stay updated to when we release episodes of shows representing the best of KPFA Radio.